Welcome to Resistance Live. Since 2017, Resistance Live has been the go-to home for political and legal news and analysis through a decidedly progressive activist lens. I'm your host, Elizabeth Cronise McLaughlin. I'm a former Wall Street and human rights lawyer, a lifelong organizer, and a leadership and impact consultant for all those seeking to lead big progressive change in these incredibly challenging times. To get bonus broadcasts, ask questions, and more, don't forget to become a paid subscriber to the show at patreon.com/resistancelive. And to learn more about what we do to help progressive leaders everywhere, check out GaiaLeadershipProject.com. And now, here's today's show. Hey, everybody. Welcome to Resistance Live for the 28th of October, 2025. First and foremost, I hope everybody who can vote in an election that's coming up next Tuesday has already early voted. New York is breaking early voter turnout records, which is incredible. But please be aware of where and how you are voting. If you are in New Jersey, New York, Pennsylvania, California, other places that have very significant elections and ballot initiatives coming up next Tuesday, a week from today, please make sure that if you can early vote, you do that. You make it so much easier on election organizers because they no longer have to target you or knock on your door in order to make sure that you are getting out to vote. Okay, today's top line story has to do with what happened last night at ICE. So just a little bit of background here. Many of you are already aware that it's not actually just ICE that is on the ground in places like Chicago and Los Angeles, all around the country, really. It's actually also Customs and Border Patrol. And one of the things that I learned 6 or 7 years ago now, when I first got really deeply involved in immigration rights-based organizing, is that Customs and Border Patrol is notorious for being one of the most violent and lawless law enforcement agencies in America. In fact, in many instances, when we're seeing footage these days, and the footage is of folks in dark green uniforms, what you are seeing is actually Customs and Border Patrol, not ICE. One of the differences in the pre-Trump era was that ICE was considered to be more like follow the rules as an agency. Now, with their enormous recruiting efforts, the ginormous budget they got at the last budget deal, that's obviously changed quite dramatically since Trump took office this time around. But Customs and Border Patrol has had very serious challenges for a very long time. Sexual assaults, actual deaths, murders of migrants, people being kidnapped at the border, generally speaking, kind of acting entirely outside the scope of the law. Okay, so last night, while everybody was watching the World Series game that went on forever, ICE and CBP, ICE particularly, underwent something of a purge. And what has happened now is that about 25% of the leadership inside ICE has been reassigned. This means very significant things for places like Denver and Chicago and other places where we have seen very serious violent rollbacks, okay? And what they are doing instead is replacing that ICE leadership in the context of field operations with Customs and Border Patrol. This is really bad. I know that for many of us, watching the footage already has been really bad. Watching what appear to be entirely untrained ICE agents busting through car windows to drag away pregnant women has been really bad. But Customs and Border Patrol, given their culture and given the fact that they are generally perceived to not be bound in by any sense of obligation to the law, is way worse than what we have already been experiencing. And so the context for this is that Stephen Miller, through Trump, has been demanding 3,000 arrests per day. This is how we got to blatant racial profiling, including through Justice Kavanaugh and the now recognized Kavanaugh stop that came out of recent litigation before the Supreme Court. They've started to undertake efforts to just simply arrest anybody who looks like they might have been born somewhere else, which generally means Black and brown people. They've arrested American citizens. There was footage yesterday of a 16-year-old American citizen and his mother being detained inside a school where he was going to school. along with his younger sister. We've seen footage of, obvious wild incursions, unlawful incursions into communities outside of Chicago, tear gassing a residential street right before a Halloween parade, forcing parents to rinse their toddlers' eyes out with from tear gas assaults. All of this has not been good. And yet, that's the understatement of the year. And yet, this is not enough for Stephen Miller, because apparently ICE's operations have been falling short of this 3,000 detainee per day quota. Their aim is to conduct 1 million mass deportations, which is insane because, they're literally picking up everyday people working jobs, going into Home Depot, going to school, going into work, in grocery store parking lots, folks who, not that it matters any longer, but, in some instances are U.S. citizens. In many instances are just hardworking people, no one having committed a crime, okay? That's not enough for Stephen Miller. So the thing to be aware of is that the replacement of ICE field operations with CBP leadership is likely to create a whole new level of violence against folks who live in the United States. And again, I'm not going to sugarcoat it for you all. Anybody who has known anything about immigration rights organizing knows that CBP has been a rogue organization for a very long time. This is not anything recent. It's not anything new. It's not anything that even necessarily was, emboldened by Trump the first time around. So, one thing that I just want people to be aware of is that this is a clear attempt to put people in charge who will have no regard for the law whatsoever. And that is raising whole new alarm bells among people who are actively organizing. I do have to point out that, in Chicago, if you need an example of the quality of organizing that is taking place there, middle schoolers are handing out whistles to people on the street. There are active efforts being made by people literally to roll out of their homes in their pajamas to warn their neighbors when ICE is coming down the street. There are active efforts to stop ICE, to chase them out of neighborhoods, and CBP as well, to stop the unlawful detainee of people. And all of this at that point has been substantial and significant. We are going to need that kind of organizing everywhere. They're trying to make an example of Chicago. Communities have come together. It is nonstop resistance. Efforts are being made everywhere to protect people, to organize, to get people groceries who are afraid to leave their homes, to pick up people's prescriptions if they're afraid to leave their homes. And, at this point, we really have to focus on need. Okay, now this intersects with something else that I wanted to talk about today, which is organizing around food insecurity. So many of you know, we talked about this last week, that SNAP benefits are going to expire on Saturday, okay? And the USDA under Trump has announced that, notwithstanding the fact that they have an enormous surplus fund of money set aside to go to SNAP in the event of a government shutdown, they will not be releasing that money. That means that 40 million plus Americans who rely on, most of whom, by the way, are children and elderly and disabled people, who rely on those benefits to survive, will not have them come Saturday. That's on top of the fact that 1.4 million civilian government workers did not get paid this week as planned. There's footage already of civilian government workers lining up at food banks. So yesterday online, there was a kind of bizarre debate that I wanted to kind of bring to this audience in case you happen to see some of it. There are random posters out there, people who I'm not familiar with, some of whom are under anonymous accounts, some of whom don't appear to have any organizing experience whatsoever, claiming that all your organizing around this should go through food banks. So I'm a huge fan of food banks, as you know. I've been recommending for years that people fund their local food banks, volunteer at their local food banks, make donations to their local food banks, okay? I'm not opposed to food banks in any way, but I need people to understand something, okay? Food banks were designed to make up for gaps in government funding to make sure people had enough food to eat. They are not designed, nor do they have the capacity to feed 40 million Americans who are pushed off SNAP. In fact, there were interviews yesterday on MSNBC and elsewhere with food bank directors saying that for every meal that a food bank provides, SNAP provides 9 more. Okay, so random people out there posting about the fact that you should only be directing your money and your effort to food banks don't actually understand the structure of food insecurity in this country. So I want to make something really clear to people, okay? Again, you should donate cash to food banks. Now, I'm just going to tell you why it should be cash and not food. Yes, of course, take some cans down there if you have extra food in your pantry. But let me just say this. Food banks, generally speaking, can buy at much more cut rate prices with their money than the average everyday U.S. resident can, okay? So they can, for every dollar that they get, they can stretch it to about 7 based on consumer pricing, all right? So donate money, first and foremost, if you have it, all right? But second of all, please understand that food banks are not going to be able to keep 40 million additional Americans alive, okay? And so one of the things that was really upsetting to me yesterday on Blue Sky, and I went in on this like quite a bit against people who were reposting randos who were saying you should only be sending money to food banks and doing nothing else, is that there have been people discouraging others from organizing their streets, their apartment building, their own neighborhood to make sure that their neighbors can eat. And what I want to remind everybody of here is that we need like a both and approach. Yes, you need to donate money to food banks, but also you've got to organize your community, okay? And I did a whole series of posts yesterday on how you can do this. There are recommendations essentially that you assign a block captain or an apartment building captain or a couple of them, all right? A neighborhood captain that is going to be responsible for small shelf organizing of food. Maybe it's like 10 5-pound bags of rice, 10 cases of black beans, diapers in a variety of sizes, baby formula, right? Making sure that you have canned vegetables and canned fruit on hand. And then essentially setting up a signal chat with your neighbors that says, there is no shame in this. If you need a bag, just send me a DM that says bag, and there will be a bag of food waiting for you on my front porch. These people you don't even have to, or on your stoop. Nobody has to identify themselves to do this. And again, you should not be debating people's politics. Food comes first, right? Your MAGA neighbor shows up starving, you feed them. Like full stop. If somebody shows up and there's somebody who, you thought would have enough money to feed themselves and they're hungry, you feed them. If someone shows up and they don't have a job, you don't demand that they work, you feed them, okay? Somebody shows up and they have an addiction, they don't have enough food, you feed them. There are no limitations to this, right? Right now, we are in an incredible crisis situation, and we can't afford to only rely on the structures that we have relied on before. This is a moment where all the things that I have been teaching to our community and this audience for years about the importance of dual power and mutual aid are coming home to roost. We need to build structures for ourselves with our neighbors that will help people to survive until this is over. This is a matter of life and death, okay? And I have to say one other thing about this, just because I know people are going to come back at me about this in the comments. I don't want to hear anything about people voted for this. Okay. I don't want to hear it. You either believe in humanity or you don't. You either are humane or you are not. Okay. And on top of that, one of the things that we have to recognize here is that they don't care that they are starving their base. I know there's a lot of people running around about this. Oh, MAGA's going to flip. MAGA's going to change their minds. Now it's all coming home to roost. I just have to point something out. Their base was always a means to an end. This is how autocratic and fascist regimes work. They con people. They manipulate people. They sell them propaganda. They profit and manipulate them on the basis of their biases and their racism. And then they abandon them to the wolves. This is classic. Okay. And so one of the things that we need to understand here is that, calling them out on their hypocrisy isn't going to work. Challenging people who are starving to vote for someone else next time is kind of being an asshole, to be honest about it. You've got to be willing to feed people for their own survival. And we will argue about politics and voter alignment down the road. But in this moment, everybody has to do their part. And, there are lots of ways to do this. I posted last night, my CSA, I belong to a farm share here that actually provides a lot of support to local farming operations, collectives, and the like, but also gets us like really good vegetables through the winter and everything when our farmers market is shut. They put out a call for donations where essentially they are going to use those donations to make sure that people who have lost their SNAP benefits can get fresh vegetables every week. Brilliant, right? There's another call going out among a parents group here that I belong to make sure that anybody who needs diapers and formula can have it literally dropped off by a neighbor on their front porch, their stoop, their apartment door. Okay. So many ways to get this done, but this is not a moment. Like, I want to make this really clear. This is not a moment where you can sit back and count on institutions that have previously filled the gaps to make up what's about to come. This is going to be a flood of starving people. It's been reported as more hungry people, food insecure people in America than have existed since the Great Depression, okay? You have any resources at all, even if your resources are just time, okay? You need to get involved in a local effort to make sure people get fed, okay? Critical. The other thing you can think about here is community fridges and community pantries. Plenty of people in my town have little community pantries that they have like put up like bird feeders in their front yards that have a few cans of food in them, maybe some dried oatmeal, and people can come by and just get that food whenever they want. Faith-based institutions in my town have similar things. They've got community fridges that are plugged in outside of the community room where people can come by and get milk, fresh food, perishable goods. These are the kind of things that we need to think about. Like, it's, and again, anybody who tells you that the only way through this is by supporting your local food bank does not understand the pressure that food banks are already under. Somebody in our own community, somebody who was in a class of ours like 5 years ago, is food insecure in Texas, went to her food bank in Texas a couple of days ago, where ordinarily you're allowed to take something like 50 pounds of food and 5 items of meat, discovered that the shelves were already bare, that there wasn't even enough food there to get the allocated amount for people who come to the food bank. All right. And we're not even at Saturday yet when SNAP benefits run out. So this is my plea to everyone in this community. If you have not yet started thinking about how to organize with your own community to feed people who are food insecure where you live, you need to do it today. You need to get a text chain going on Signal. You need to talk to your neighbors. At the bare minimum, you should start cooking food for people if you have it. You should make cash donations to food banks if that's your only option. Like, certainly support them. Don't get me wrong. I'm going to repeat it again. I'm not opposed to food banks, but you need to actually really get involved in doing this. Okay. Critically important that you get involved in doing it right now. All right. Because we're coming in for a world of hurt. And that's on top of the fact that Saturday is the day where in the last remaining states, we're going to learn what is happening to premiums for healthcare under Obamacare. Here where I live, I am incredibly panicked about the letter that I'm about to get because I already pay $1,200 through Obamacare for insurance for me and my 2 kids. We'll see, okay? But things are about to get very dire. And so I really do want to recommend to people that, you know, whatever you can do around food insecurity right now, you do it, okay? Even if it's something small. If you yourself are, you know, living, you know, on the edge of things, please make sure that you are reaching out to get what you need. We care about you. We want you to survive, right? But we've all got to be in this together. Like, it's critical at this point. And at the bare minimum, you know, you should be checking in with your neighbors, making sure people have what they need, organizing in such a way where people who are embarrassed, maybe feel ashamed about the fact that they can't afford food, can access it. Critical. All right. And please ignore anybody who is like dissuading people from organizing around this. This is a moment where like dual power demands that we build alternative structures. All right. Okay. That's my little rant for today. Hurricane Melissa is now larger than Hurricane Katrina, bearing down on Jamaica, Haiti, Cuba, the Dominican Republic, with sustained winds of above 185 miles an hour. This is a Category 5 monster storm. Many of you know that a number of years ago now, 17 years ago now, I spent a significant amount of time in Haiti and doing some volunteer work. I can just tell you that, you know, the level of poverty in certain parts of these islands is such that, you know, people are living in structures that can't withstand a hard rain. The devastation from this is going to be generational. Already people have died. And so, you know, I just want to remind everybody, first, shout out to anybody who's got family in that region, because I imagine that it is incredibly terrifying right now. But also, please keep in mind, I have a thread going on Blue Sky already this morning that donations may be needed to help people survive there as well. And I know we've got a lot going on. I know that this is an incredibly challenging time for so many Americans. And at the same time, I really feel for people who are about to be in the middle of an enormous climate emergency, because there's no question that the reason why the storm is so powerful is because of warmer waters in the Caribbean Ocean that have allowed it to become stronger than any storm that we've seen in at least a generation. So again, please be mindful of all of our neighbors to the south. Okay. Couple things that I just want to mention here. I was asked a few questions about conspiracy theories, despair, and desperation on our side of the fence over on the Patreon feed this morning. Quick reminder, if you want to ask me questions, please join our Patreon. There is a 20% off annual subscription code running between now and the end of the year. Using the code FALL2025, you get to ask me questions for 3 hours before every broadcast. Feed was a little late this morning. Sorry, you guys, just by like 20 minutes. But nonetheless, you get to ask me questions before every broadcast. You get weekly bonus broadcasts. Please join us over there if you haven't already to support this work. This morning, people were asking me about family members who appear to have fallen for, what I will just say is like targeted propaganda. Some of this, I think, is actually coming from well-meaning sources, but it's like, this is what Ross Vogt planned all along. He always intended to shut the government down so he could consolidate power. And so what's the point? And it's all like hopeless. Okay, I just have to point something out, all right? Notwithstanding the fact that there are tremendous ulterior motives at the top of this regime, any messaging that sends the message that all hope is lost, that we're fucked. We've talked about this before. I hate that. Like, I'm almost blocking people on site when they say stuff like that right now on Blue Sky. Anything along those lines is actually doing the work of fascism for it, okay? Because as, we all should have learned by now, there is tremendous power in people coming together and organizing. No one has any idea what's going to happen next. Okay, we don't know what's going to happen tomorrow or a week from now or a month from now with this regime and the people at the top of it. Okay, what we do know is that there are way more of us than there are of them. Okay, Trump at the moment is in the 20s as far as polling goes on many significant issues. Okay, one of the reasons, as we've discussed here many, many times, why they are ramping up the violence with these illegal boat bombings where they're mass murdering people, fishermen, right? Why we're seeing this incredible uptick in violence on the streets of America at the hands of CBP and ICE. All of this is because they know they are losing control. They know that they are despised. They know that their agenda is not welcome. They know that, like, the polls are showing right now that the elections that are happening next week are going to have massive Democratic turnout. I think we're going to see some shocking results there, frankly, based on what I'm seeing so far. In terms of numbers, one of the things that we have to keep in mind here is that the power of the people is yet unseen, okay? And one of the things that is incredibly key to keeping going in this era and maintaining our efforts is to not fall prey to the doomsaying. What's the point? It's all over. They've just done this. They're in charge. Nobody can do anything in response to it. Blech. Like, that is disinformation. It is propaganda designed to manipulate people into being frozen, isolated, and unorganized. Okay, so if you're concerned about like messaging that is putting your family and your friends in a place of feeling hopeless, your next step has to be to say something similar to what I've just said here. Nobody knows what's going to happen next. But what we do know is that every fascist regime in history has been toppled by people coming together, right? Yes, of course, we can point to war in World War II and the work of the Allies and the efforts to depose Hitler from power. But you know what else worked in that era? The French resistance, which was decentralized cells of people fighting back against fascism, many of whom didn't even know who was in the next cell over. And they organized nonetheless to create pockets of resistance that around events like D-Day and others really created enormous shifts in the power structure during the war, whether that was in Vichy France, whether that was in other parts of the Nazi regime. There's a lot to be said about people coming together. And I just have to say one other thing about this. There's no way that all hope can be lost in this country unless everybody gives up. Every fascist regime in history has been toppled eventually. Yes, sometimes it takes time, right? But it doesn't change the fact that you have a choice right now. You can either decide to get involved or you can basically be a coward. There was a piece of footage last night, by the way, from a speech that Ta-Nehisi Coates gave, who I adore, by the way. Just one of the most incredible minds and commentators of our generation, where he was talking about the fact that he knew that it was going to be bad when Trump was reelected. But what he wasn't prepared for was that how many leaders and how many institutions and how many individuals in America would just fucking capitulate, pardon my French, right? Would just like give up, throw up their hands, bend the knee, be done with it, right? And what he said was, this will come to an end. It remains to be seen whether we will be alive when it happens. But this moment, like, we were here before him and there will be people here after him. This moment will come to an end. But if we're not here, make sure you tell your children who the cowards are. That's a direct quote. I will tell you that I watched this at like 5:30 this morning with like my jaw on the floor and tears running down my face because he's right. He's right. And if you have friends and family right now who are like, hands up, this is the moment to ask them. Ask them. Are they going to capitulate, cower in fear, buy the line that it's all hopeless, all hope is lost, America is done for? Or are they going to find the will to be courageous? Right? Because that's what we need right now. We need courage. We need people to stand up and work with their neighbors and collaborate with organizations, volunteer their skills to make a difference, show up and communicate across issues and identities and groups and movements. Be a part of the solution, however small your role may be. Everyone has a role to play in this era, okay? And I'm just going to tell you one other thing. Meme culture is a part of the problem, right? Accounts that say things like, you know, all hope is lost are a part of the problem. Cynicism and bitterness in this era is a part of the problem, okay? You can deal with the reality of what you're facing and what we're all facing together as a nation and fundamentally as a planet, and still decide to remember that solutions exist, that there is power in people organizing, that there may be answers to what we're facing that are as yet undiscovered, and that the future of current events is as yet unknown. So we have a desperate need right now to pull people back from the brink of that, to talk them off the ledge, as so many of you come here on a daily basis to get from me, right? If you have friends and neighbors who are sending you stuff in group chats that's like, we're all screwed because Russ Vogt says it is, I will remind you all that he is just one man. And yes, he may have an enormous amount of power. And yes, he may have friends like Stephen Miller and Donald Trump, but there are way more of us than there are of them. Okay. So that, I know I said I was done with my rant for today. That's my little rant on that. All right. For those of you who are new and emerging organizers, you have 3 days left to join us in Power Lab, where you will get all of this and a lot more. Power Lab is our latest program. We are only running it once. This will be your last chance to work with me in a public program for at least the next year based on our planning right now. I will be working, of course, with our clients inside the Ripple Effect Institute. That is our strategy incubator and think tank for people who are here to build generational level movements for change. But if you are a new or emerging organizer, and this is the moment where you want to turn your outrage and despair into actual community action, you got to get in on Power Lab. The doors close for that at 8 p.m. on Friday nights. We have a lot of alums here from our various programs who can attest to the difference that our programming has made in their work and their ability to create change where they live. Also, some of our members of the Ripple Effect Institute are here. Hi, I'm waving at you. See you in an hour on our weekly call, one of our weekly calls. But I do want to just remind everybody that, you know, training and capacity building and learning is an important part of figuring out how to plug in right now. And this program will help you do it. So there's a link to Power Lab below already. I'll also make sure that I link it up here like I always do on these broadcasts when I mention it. Final point for today. I just want everybody to understand that there's really at this point no way to avoid what's coming on Saturday in terms of the end of SNAP benefits, because Mike Johnson is not going to reopen the government between now and then. So just please, if you're in any community-based group, whether that's on Nextdoor, which generally I despise because there's so much racism on there, but if you have a community group on Nextdoor, even if you got a community group on Facebook, I'm not a fan of Meta at all. Don't believe anybody should be on it, but many of you are still doing work there. Please check in and ask if anybody's organizing for food security for your neighbors. Find out what people are already doing, all right? And make sure you tap in and get moving in the right direction, all right? It's just so critical. It's so critical. And you have the prospect of saving people's lives. Like, you can be the hero of your neighborhood, your apartment block, your street. Like, step into that role. Don't neglect it. Anybody can do this work. Okay, it's just a matter of finding a couple of shelves, filling them with staples that your neighbors can even donate or you can build collectively, and then putting bags on your front stoop for your neighbors to come and get if they need it. It's really easy and it's necessary for all of us to be doing. All right, that's it for today, my friends. I will be here all week, regular time. Hang in there. I know it's rough. I get it. And also, keep your chins up, because this is really where the rubber meets the road, to be honest. This is the moment where we all have to come together and do this work that we've been training for and prepping for and participating in maybe already for years. This is the critical moment. We have to save people's lives. All right, I'll catch you all back here tomorrow, regular time. Take care, everyone. That's our show for today, folks. Thanks so much for being here at Resistance Live. To get more out of the show, including bonus broadcasts, the answers to all your most pressing political and legal questions, and way more, head on over to patreon.com/resistancelive and become a paid subscriber. And don't forget to hit subscribe here on your favorite podcasting platform to make sure that you never miss an episode. See you next time.